Here's how to make a probing operation in an X. When we're in application manufacturing, we can go into our program and say create operation. We'll go to the probing toolpath type and we're going to select mill part probing. We'll then select our MU500 touch probe that we have loaded into our tool list and use this for our example. It will only allow you to have probing tools in this tool list here to select from. Once we have our probe selected, we can say OK, and then you'll see our settings appear here. I've already predefined in my toolpath defaults that this is the structure that I would like for our probing operation. This first machine control is going to be probe on, making that status active. So that's going to be a command to turn on the probe. My last machine control is probe off, the command to turn off the probe. Based on how your post-processor is set up, you may or may not have to do these two functions. You might be able to just probe a point. In our example, we have our post set up to where most of the probing functions are very manual. We have to be extremely deliberate about what we want to do, and that's intentional because the probe is a very delicate and high-risk tool. So we want to make sure that it's only doing what we exactly control. What you'll do is you can create a new sub-operation if you do not have one called probe point. By doing that, or to do that, you click that plus sign, and then you can select probe point from the dialog box here. Since I already have a probe point, I'm just going to go ahead and select this one here by double-clicking it. When I do so, it's going to pop up with the inspect point dialog box. Here, we can specify a point that we want to touch. I'm going to toggle this down to be a point on the face because I want to touch a specific spot on the face of my part model. We'll go ahead and pick this point here on this face, and you can see that this arrow is pointing downward. That's not what we want to do since we're probing in the Y direction. We can change that by changing our probing direction here to be Y+. This is going to be the direction that you want the probe to travel from. So if you notice the arrow, imagine the probe is right here, and it's going to be moving this direction towards the arrow, towards your point, and touch that point. Once we have our point selected, we could then change our tolerance based on how your post handles the tolerance output for your locations. But my settings are going to be OK. We'll say OK here, and then we can say OK again and generate this toolpath. You can now see that there is this blue line traversing to the toolpath, or to that point that we selected. That line is the length that it is here because of this standoff distance. You can change this to be whatever you need it to be. Some machines it might have to be within 1/2 of an inch of the point. Some it may not matter. It's just going to move until it selects or touches that point that you're giving it. But that's just going to be totally dependent on the machine and the control that you have. But that is how you probe a point. You can do that in any direction. Depending on your post, you may or may not have 5-axis probing functionality, but all machines that have probing software on them and touch probes in them can probe in the X, Y, and Z axis on